LiSTNR production.
A warning. This episode contains references to suicide. If this content affects you, dial Lifeline on 13 11 14. In 1997, police were on high alert. Gang wars were threatening to take over Sydney. Armed bikies were rampaging through the streets, often in stolen vehicles, wreaking havoc and committing brazen crimes in busy public areas. On one warm day in November, General Duties Officer Jeff Garland spotted two men with their hands concealed in heavy trench coats rushing to a silver Porsche. Immediately, something seemed off. The coats when it was so warm, the hands in their pockets, and the flash car. Jeff could have easily let them go, but instead, he followed his hunch and pursued the two men. I'm former police officer Brent Sanders, and for the past 25 years, I've dedicated myself to sharing what I've learnt on the force to the Australian public so they can better protect themselves from falling victim to crime. So with the help of some of the most respected current and former detectives and high-ranking law enforcement agents, we're going to pull back the curtain on what life is like on the force and what they've learned about how crime and criminals really work. These are real stories from real detectives.
I've been at Redfern for probably 6 months at that stage. Still very junior police there. I was a senior person on the car. I'd only been out of the academy just over 12 months and I was a senior person on the car, had a young probationary constable with me. Basically, we're just patrolling around the area. So we had Redfern, which is the main part of it. For those who don't know, Redfern's basically the next suburb south of Sydney, the Sydney CBD. And just across the road, near that is the Chippendale area where they had the Black Market Cafe, which was a local hangout for S&M and that sort of thing, like late nights and early mornings if you want somewhere to go to party and into that sort of scene. So we were just driving around that area doing a car patrol. And I had a feeling when I was driving around that there were people looking down from the top of the old service station, looking down towards the front of it. And I had this feeling that something was going on. Like in the cops, you develop gut instincts and things like that. So what I did is I drove around the back of the cafe and come back out and parked. I was probably 100 metres away from the actual intersection where the front of the cafe was. And then all of a sudden, these two gentlemen come running out of from the front of the cafe in towards the park vehicles, about two vehicles parked in front of us. It was a silver Porsche. They were in their 30s. They had long trench coats on. One guy got in the driver's side, the other bloke had his hand concealed in his in the trench coat, got into the passenger side with his hand still in the trench coat, opened the door, got in, and then we watched them drive off, did a vehicle check on the car to see if the car was stolen. Come back as not reported stolen. It was a hire car from somewhere. Next second, they've just disappeared. They've accelerated, and we've got into pursuit with them. Offside her, she was calling locations, turned left up towards Surrey Hills, and then we come back around. They've gone up, turned left. I've gone up and followed them as well. Gone down a main street, and the vehicle's not in front of us. So it had to be in one of the two streets beside us. So I've gone up the second street, drove up, and the bloke I saw with his hand concealed in his jacket walks around the corner. So I've got out the car, grabbed him, held him against the wall, and got my side to stay with him. I'll poke my head around the corner because I had no idea at that stage where the driver was. I'll come back round. He's pushed off the wall and starts running down the street. So we've had a foot pursuit, chased him down the road. Man, the public was pushing his bike up the road and threw his bike towards him, made him slow down. We've tackled him, arrested him at that stage for resisting police, and we had him in handcuffs. It was about 15 minutes later. We I did the right thing, called for a tow for the vehicle, and then at this stage he was just a passenger in the car. We had him for the resist police, and then 15 minutes later get a call from police radio saying that a firearm had been thrown out during the pursuit, had been handed into the Mounted Police Station. Another 15 minutes later, the call actually comes, no Redfern car in the car vicinity, short of a shooting at the Black Market Cafe. And that's when the penny starts to drop. So basically, the moment we saw them out, they'd just come from the basement of the cafe, murdered three of the leading members of the opposing OMCGs, the Bandidos, got in the car, had a pursuit with us, and that's when we made that arrest. And then we took him at the police station. He had an injury to his arm from a bullet. So we took him to the hospital for surgery. We've come out of the in hospital, and then all of a sudden all these SPG people are at the at the hospital because there was fears that the rebels were going to come and try and actually get them out of hospital. So we went back, got charged with I think it was triple murder and one count of attempted murder because one of the ones who survived got in a taxi and drove off. The other guy got arrested in I think it was Port Botany, I think it was, on his way out of on a big cargo ship, and I was able to identify him as well as the driver of the vehicle at the time. And then the matter goes to court, and lots of evidence and stuff like that, and interviews, and it was intense for someone that junior to be that involved in having that result from gut feeling, arresting one murderer, however, identifying a second one 30 minutes before it was even called. It's like, wow.
Goodness me. I mean, there would be police with, to spend the whole service, never get that close to something like that. And I take you back to that gut feeling that you spoke about. And, this is something that even though you'd only been in the job for 12 months, it's impossible not to develop that, isn't it? When you're just driving around in the cars and
Yep.
you're sort of looking, I'll just run this past you. I used to find when I was first out of the academy, 12 months doesn't sound like a long time, but you cram a lot into that 12 months. In those early days, I'd always be buggered at the end of a shift because you're sort of sitting there sort of half on edge. And I used to marvel at the more senior guys who seemed so relaxed and they could be chatting and then they'd suddenly stop, reverse up,
Yep.
and they've seen something. 12 months in, and you've seen a lot in that time, that's that gut feeling that made you think, it's all that combination, that what they were wearing, the temperature, the time of day, the car they're driving. Why didn't they pull up? All these things. It's interesting, isn't it?
Well, that was all that stuff happened after the gut feeling. So that was like the gut feeling was there. Something's not right. Okay, there's a lot of people around. There just doesn't feel like this is the right, something's happening here. So I had no idea. Then we drove around, and that's when they started coming out, and they were both wearing the trench coats and what they were wearing and their age and the vehicle. He had his hand concealed, the car pursuit, believes had a firearm, all that sort of stuff. They'd all just come as a result of that. So they had no idea that what they'd just done, because as I said, it's like stuff you see on TV. And then you arrest one of them, and then you find out half an hour later that they're just murdered. Like, I still can't believe if that's what they just did, which is what they just did, why they just pull out the guns and just shoot us. They just murdered 3 members of the OMC, the Bandidos. Why didn't they just basically just keep going? Because I think it stood between them and freedom was us.
Yeah, well, maybe, who knows? I'm sure you've played this in your mind 1,000 times. Maybe they were surprised to see you as you were to see them. But just tell me the suburb where you caught the chap on foot. What suburb was that?
That was the eastern side of Surrey Hills near South Dowling Street. So I was up at the area, just a short distance away from Oxford Street.
Yeah,
so
around Paddington.
Yeah.
Around Paddington. Very populated area.
Yep.
Now, when you caught that bloke on foot and you left you're 12 months in, but you're the senior man in the car. You're offside her. She's probably thinking, oh, my goodness me. She'd be looking back at the story thinking.
Yeah.
When you grabbed that bloke, no firearms on him?
No, nothing. No.
In the car?
No.
They were ditched in the pursuit, all of them?
Well, obviously they both had a firearm. They both involved the shooting. So one had been thrown out during the pursuit, and which was recovered 15 minutes later and handed into the police station at the Manor Police Station at Redfern. And the other one, I think, it was recovered later. And they found, they did search warrants. They found evidence of them actually on a property, actually using those same firearms as shooting practice and stuff like that. So a lot of investigation went into linking it all together.
So just looking at that timeline, I'm going to say it's about 30 minutes after you've restrained that bloke that you realise that he's responsible, him and his offside are responsible for the multiple homicides. Well,
even after they called 15 minutes later that a firearm had been thrown out, it's like, okay, we still had no idea what had happened. Like he'd thrown a firearm. Was it his firearm? Was it the driver's firearm? And we just didn't know. So it wasn't until they actually called that there was an actual shooting there. And I never actually went there. I saw, like, obviously the crime scene photos of stuff of where it happened and everything else.
Now, the guy that you caught, he's pinned up against the wall. Your offside has got him. Then he sort of gets out of that escapes on foot. You've got a member of the public who throws his 10-speed at him to slow him down. Then you've tackled him. This guy's a member of the rebels, so they're reasonably big units. Plus, he's running from police because he knows if he gets caught, he's up on a murder charge. Did he have a bit of a crack, or?
I didn't have much choice. I was like, I weighed over 100 kilos back then. I was on his back and I'm offsider as well. There was 2 on 1. There's not much he could do. So we got him in handcuffs and everything else, and he was basically just went, okay.
I wonder if your approach to it would have been any different had you known what you found out later, if that would have changed anything. Sometimes, to be fair, ignorance can be bliss, can't it? You sometimes maybe you're better off not knowing all that, because it can cloud the choices that you make.
It can. Like, obviously, I made decisions in that time based on that limited experience, based on the information they had, my own observations, gut feelings. But now looking back, if I'd known that they were armed, they certainly wouldn't have parked where I was, a short distance away from the vehicle. I would have called that information out during the pursuit and stuff like that, and everything else. Like, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but in that moment, you've got a split second to make a choice. Okay, you've got the gut feeling, this looks suspicious, you've got your ideas what may have happened, then they've taken off, see that, go, okay, let that go, let's deal with the pursuit at this stage, let's deal with that. There's still not something right, let's just follow them and try and find them. Okay, good, there they are, then that happens, and then it's like a triple murder investigation and bikie murders, and then there's a court case after that and everything else. So it's
probably, in hindsight, one of the most straightforward arrests of a triple murderer made in New South Wales police history. Now, the guy, the driver, he's decamped. He's gone probably in the opposite direction to his mate. How long after this incident was he finally tracked down?
I think 3 months later.
3 months?
From my understanding, the timeline, I think it was, we arrested the first one in November 97. He was arrested maybe January or February 1998, early on that part of next year.
Now, also, of course, and this is taking nothing away from general duties coppers, but this is a homicide. That's not something that you and your partner are going to take much part in investigating. That's a homicide squad will come in and do that. They wouldn't have got a whole lot of help from the banditos. They're not usually going to be too open chatting to the police, and they prefer to take things into their own hands. So some crucial evidence in this case that would have led to these convictions, because these cases can be very difficult when, obviously, the offenders aren't going to say much, but the victims of the crime are going to be probably just as anti-police as the offenders. Yeah,
they're not the type of sort of organisation people, like victims that you'd usually deal with if someone gets murdered, they want to assist. So I know that the banditos are very grateful for the arrest and what happened and everything else. I went to court and I was sitting there and had someone come and say thank you, and the parents and partners of those who were deceased and stuff like that, they come and said thank you and everything else. So both getting convicted and serving 32 years each.
That was my last question. They both got decent custodial sentences. And
they did.
And, on the gut feeling of a probationary constable 12 months out of the academy, mate, it's not a bad result.
I learned so much in that process of the arrest, my investigations, my observation skills, what I could have done differently and things like that. And I mean, now I was okay. Like, I rang my wife at the time and said, look, this is what's happened. She got no surprise. So I ended up staying at the police station doing statements, and I drove around trying to find CCTV footage because we had the bloke. I wanted to try and find the other offender and things. So I tried to get in the investigation part of it as well and things, and I was okay. And then it wasn't until I actually heard the actual pursuit tape that I broke down. It didn't hit me and say, this is really good fun, like great, I really proud of myself, did good and got a good result. But then I listened to the actual pursuit tape going, I could have died that day. And it just basically hit me, and I was like, okay, this is just a bit much for me at the moment. So, being in my OMCGs, like, there's always the fear of backlash and revenge against you because you're the investigating officer, the arresting officer, and stuff like that. And we had issues with other gangs in the Redfern area that actually got car regos and would make threats against us and stuff like that. So it was something that just was hanging over your head throughout that time and throughout. Because it took years to go to court, then it took years to for the result and stuff like that. And I was actually off work after another incident when I jumped in a ute, and when the prosecutor rang and said, no, they're being convicted and this is what's happening on the rest of it. So yeah, it certainly had an effect on me. But in that time, you just, in that moment, you flick a switch and you do what you've got to do.
You're still based in Redfern, 2001, so 4 years on from our last case we were chatting about. You've jumped into the tray of a stolen ute, which proceeded to drive through the city of Sydney during peak hour traffic. This is one we've got to have a chat about.
Good idea at the time. I was driving to work that morning, had another gut feeling it wasn't going to be a good day. So got to work, have an argument with the crime manager, the inspector, never a good start to a shift. I was working with, again, another junior constable. I think it's his second day on the shift. So we got stationed in Redfern in what's called the block area. So in terms of crime, drugs, stuff like that. So they call it the block just as a reference to basically we know where to attend. So that day we're driving around the area, saw this Toyota Land Cruiser ute just parked in one of the streets, which is known for drug offences. Done a check on the vehicle, come back as stolen. So I was the passenger at this stage and the probationary constable was driving. So we're driven around the block and the ute drives down the street towards us. So I said, look, block him in. So we've blocked him in. So I've got out the passenger side of the vehicle, full uniform, up the driver's side window, said, mate, stop, you're under arrest. Next thing I know, I'm in the tray of the ute driving down the street. I had no idea how I managed to get my 100-kilo bulk frame with all my appointments leather jacket into this tray of the ute. Toyota Land Cruiser ute, they're a tall ute. So I was in that. He's driving away from this poor probationary constable who's standing there with his hands in the air going, what do I do? So I've called Redfern 45. That was a course on. Redfern 45 urgent. I'm in the tray of a stolen ute. The radio operator's gone, just confirming you're in pursuit of the vehicle. I said, no, I'm in the tray at the back radio. I need some assistance. So Redfern cars, any car in the area. Redfern 45's in the tray of a stolen ute. Gave the reg of the car. So he's driving away from the block. I'm looking at him through the rear window. So it's just basically, it's a ute, so 2 seats, and then the tray. In the tray of the ute, they had 2 toolboxes, one on each side of the ute, and there's a length of rope that was tied to basically where the back window was. So I've seen that. I've grabbed that. I've tied my hand around that because he's just basically seen me and accelerating. He's swerving all over the road. He's braking harshly, trying to throw me out. So we've gone from into Redfern, gone across. It's like 8:30 on a Monday morning. So all these people are coming to work and everything else, and here I am in the back of the ute calling urgent in pursuit. Not in pursuit, but in the tray. So he's driven across the road into the Chippendale area where he's actually ramming parked cars on the side of the road. He actually T-boned a big van. And then when he's T-boned the big van, the vehicle's come to a stop. So I felt like I've got to stop this. So I've got my firearm out of the holster and basically held it to the window and said, stop or I'll shoot. He's just reversed and then just kept going. And then he's gone into the city, going across the Parramatta Road, the Broadway, wherever it is, in towards Ultimo. And there's like people everywhere, like red lights, green lights. He's just going through it. We've gone into Ultimo and there's just people everywhere. We're going towards this intersection, pedestrian crossing, and there's people walking across. I'm thinking, this is not going to end well. And all of a sudden, it just this big gap just opened up. No one was walking across as we've gone across. I've got to end this. I can't let this keep going. So I can shoot him, which could end the pursuit, but also could kill a member of the public on the way to work. Or I can just hope that this is going to end peace. This is going to end well. Okay, so he's driven over the pedestrian crossing, missed everybody, come around the corner, and he's turned right on Harris Street, Ultimo, back up towards the city. So he's turning against traffic, going around a blind corner. I'm looking over the edge of the radio, of the tray. Everything's just slow motion. I'm just looking at that. The tray's just tilting to the left. I'm going to die. And he's continued in. So he's driven around other corners, past Paddy's Markets, in towards George Street, and then towards basically Central Railway Station. So at that stage, he's mounted the strip, knocked over a no stopping sign, and then the vehicle starts spinning on the grass. So I thought, I've got to end this. Okay, there's no one around, the car's spinning out. So I've actually smashed my hand and gun through the window, held it against his head. I said, stop the car, I'll shoot you. Passenger's gone, no, see you later. He's hit the frog and toe. He's just run in that direction. The car's still spinning. The driver jumps out. I jump off the tray of the ute and start chasing him on foot towards basically where Central Railway Station is, where the monorail is now, where the tram tracks are. He started running towards that, then jumped off over the fence, and then he starts running away. But I saw there's a couple of detectives down the bottom who were chasing him. And at that stage, I just started walking down. I'm going, I couldn't believe what had just happened to me. So I walked around the corner. I gave a description of what the driver was wearing so they would know. Drove around and sat down in the front of a cafe. And members of the public coming up to me going, are you okay? I had blood all over my hands. My hands were shaking, and they were giving me drinks of water. They're washing down my injuries and stuff until the ambulance and stuff occurred. End up locking up the passenger and the driver. You end up running into a building full of police on a training day. Of all the buildings, that's karma for you. So he got arrested. He got taken back to the police. They both got taken back to the police station. Had an inspector turn up and said, look, I can't do this anymore. I want you to call my wife. I gave him my firearm, my appointments, and I just I went to hospital, had internal injuries and stuff like that. Got to hospital, just started breaking, just started bawling. The adrenaline had gone and come back because of everything I've just been involved in. And I was just started breaking down in tears. Or police there, I knew I was just bawling my eyes. He was a bloke in uniform, just going, I can't do this anymore. I asked the inspector to call my wife, but he didn't. So my daughter was 2 months old. So my wife had rang my phone saying, which I'd left in the tray of the ute, to say, look, no, she's been watching Elmo and she was giggling, that sort of stuff, just as an update because I wasn't seeing it. So, but a detective answered the phone, goes, haven't you heard Jeff's in hospital? He's almost killed. He did this. So she came down, get me from the hospital, take me back to the police station. And basically the boss said to my wife, who was also a serving officer, she was at Redfern with the Central Coast, basically said, when you're finished with him, send him to me, give me a go. That was my debrief. So I tried to do the statement the best I could do for the brief and the charges and stuff like that, and I just went, no, that was my last day in Redfern. So he got charged with some offences, nothing against me, got driver manner dangerous, but nothing in terms of assaulting police, attempted murder, whatever, that sort of stuff. It just didn't happen. So that was my last day in Redfern. And I didn't get any support from work. All I got was a phone call saying I had some briefs outstanding when I was going to come back to work and do it. But that was Redfern. That was the police back then.
Mate, that is one of the most amazing stories I think I've ever heard. I mean, it's
and it's all on CCTV, so I can watch it. And the thing was, like, for so long I was trapped in the tray of the ute. For me, my perspective was, I'm in the tray of the ute, this bloke's trying to kill me, I'm seeing everything go past, all the what ifs going in my head. If I did this, I'll shoot them, he could lose control, kill someone, or I'm going to die, sort of thing. But it took 6 months through my psychiatrist and detective I know to get me the actual footage. And as soon as I sat and watched the footage, I was fine because I was no longer trapped in the tray of the ute. I could actually sit from a perspective looking at this idiot who happened to be me in that event. And my wife at the time, she said, if you do that again, I'm going to kill you myself. But it was, for so long, I'd been trapped in that memory of what was going on, the emotions. But by allowing myself to watch the footage, I could look at it from a different perspective, which changed the meaning, which removed the emotion, which was a massive thing in terms of my recovery and being able to turn back to work.
Just explain that to me. What is it about that I get that when you're watching the CCTV footage, you're looking at a third person, almost like a bird's eye view of yourself in that situation. But what is it about that enabled you to better deal with it?
I do a lot of work now in mental health. So it's not about what happens to you. It's about the meaning and emotion you attach to it. For me, because my only perspective was being in the ute, there's a lot of fear, feeling unsafe, feeling danger that I'm going to die. So by allowing myself to look at it from a perspective of the CCTV footage, it allowed a different perspective where it was third person, where I wasn't in the ute, I was watching someone in the ute. So therefore, I didn't feel trapped. I didn't no longer not feel safe. So I wasn't reacting with fear. It's just this belief that I actually did it. So it allowed me to remove the emotions and the intensity of those emotions. So it allowed me to go, look, I'm not trapped in the ute anymore. I'm someone who just did that. And I've been around the utes before. I've actually gone to this Central train station and can actually walk past there now and not be affected by it because the mind's no longer associating that to that incident in that way. I know that I'm safe because I'm not trapped in the ute. I've seen it from a different perspective and I've been back there and everything's completely different.
Mm. I'm pretty familiar with that area that you're referring to. You know, I used to live around Erskineville and things. I know that area really well. Yep. And I'm tracing in my mind the track of that car as you were explaining it from in and around sort of Everleigh Street in Redfern, across, I guess, Cleveland Street, down almost past the Blackwell Cafe again. You know,
by the other side of it, yeah.
Yeah, and then zipping across Broadway, down through Ultimo where the ABC building is. You're in the back of that ute for quite some period of time.
It felt like forever. Yeah.
In real time, it was probably a quarter of an hour.
It could have been 5, probably 10 minutes maximum because he was going.
Because he's flying.
Yeah.
8:30. You're talking
lots
Sydney
of
peak hour traffic.
Yep.
Goodness me. Now, no memory. That was an interesting one where you said you're talking to the guy, saying, "Get out of the car. You're under arrest, stolen vehicle," and then your next memory is you're in the tray. Has any of the work that you've done with going back through that cleared that memory up or identified to you what triggered you doing that?
So basically, it was a reflex action. Again, a split-second decision. He was in the wrong. I was trying to enforce the law. It wasn't going, okay, I didn't consciously go, look, okay, he's driving away. I'm going to jump into you. It's like he's under arrest. He's driving away. So I've actually can visualise now the fact that me actually, through momentum, throwing myself into the back of the ute. But I blocked that memory out because it's just basically you're under arrest. It is significant. What happened next?
Because, I mean, all jokes aside, it's not something you'd find in any sort of instruction manual, is it?
No, it's not part of our training, no. So
it's an incredibly bizarre set of circumstances. I was telling my wife this story last night. I said, I'm interviewing this chap tomorrow, and I went through the story, and she looked up and she said, who are you interviewing? Bruce Willis? That story, it's got a bit of sort of die hard about it. It's almost unbelievable that you lived through that. And I know that you're injured. You're actually off work, I think, for 18 months after that. But goodness, it could have been so much worse.
Yeah, so up until that stage, I knew I wasn't coping. That's when the PTS, it wasn't just that event, it's everything else I'd been involved in up until that time that basically that shut me down. Because I knew I wasn't coping, but because of the lack of education around what it is, what it isn't, I thought that I was just working in the wrong job. So that was basically the straw that broke the camel's back. That was, if you look at the feather brick truck principle, that was my literal truck that stopped me in my tracks to make me actually go off and get help. And that I'm glad that I did. It was very unpolice-like, unbloke-like, but I did. And then because of that, I was able to return to work for another 10 years. But I never drank before I joined the cops. And I did to fit in than I did to cope. And then I stopped drinking for 16 years. But there's so much stuff, especially in places like Redfern, you're going to get involved in stuff. There's just not the support there to be able to process the stuff. And at some stage, it becomes too much. And for me, that was it. I could not do that anymore.
You talk about that drinking, how you hadn't drunk before. You started drinking because it was the thing that was done at the end of the shift. The blokes sit around and you have a few beers. But then, am I right in hearing what you're saying, that drinking became a coping mechanism for you because you were really struggling?
Yep, I used it to cope, use it to shut down because the body doesn't want to feel emotion. So I created this association to, I'm stressed, I want to shut down. What makes me feel that way? I'll have alcohol because that just basically makes me just feel completely numb. So I would do that. I drink lots of alcohol in order to shut down so I wouldn't have to deal with the memories, the flashbacks, and everything that was going on. So, and then while I was off work, I was able to return to work up in Lake Macquarie. I worked in the back area, still couldn't wear uniform, couldn't identify myself as a policeman, even though I loved the job. And then I was seeing a psychiatrist and a psychologist, and the stigma around what post-traumatic stress is, but the stigma around getting help too, seeing a shrink and stuff. There's all that stuff as well, and being a man, being affected. But then I went to a training day. I had a fatal car accident happen right in front of me. And I was okay. Like, I was struggling with this post-traumatic stress and not knowing who I was, not identify myself as a policeman. Then this accident happened right in front of me. The switch has just gone. I've just gone straight into police mode. Checked on the driver. He'd passed away. Covered him up with a blanket. Did what I had to do. And I was okay until the wife turned up. And one of the things happened is the supervisor turned up and he said to me, "Are you okay?" It's like, I've never been asked that before in my career. And here I was. And I was okay. But as soon as she turned up, I went home. I went and had a nice hot bath. I had a glass of bourbon in one hand and the psychiatrist on the phone in the other hand. I had to have that to calm me down because that's how I coped. But I also had reached out to other ways of doing things too. So I use it, and a lot of police do that. They use that to shut down, to not be able to cope, but it's the wrong way. There should be proper education as opposed to creating an association to drinking because that's what you're supposed to do, and that's the wrong way to do it.
Look, so often when I've had the privilege of speaking to police who have been so open as you are about the battles with post-traumatic stress, the alcohol is an accompaniment to that. It's just, I don't think I've spoken to a police officer who's gone through the type of stuff that you've gone through who hasn't mentioned the drink. They seem to go hand in hand. And I know, I went through the academy just a little before you, but it's the same generation. It was used. The worse the job was that you did, the tougher your shift was, the more you drunk afterwards. And it was it was done, and it wasn't even done with any malice. It was
a bonding thing.
The senior guys, your sergeant would say to you as a young 19-year-old copper, mate, that that was a fatal or it was a sudden death or whatever. Okay, after we're all going to get together and have a
This is
few
how
drinks.
we deal with it.
Yeah. And so you associate, it's that Pavlov's dog thing, isn't it? You start to think, I'll be okay doing this as long as I can have a few drinks when I knock off. And
but then you go off work and you got all you've got is time and the memories of what you've got. So all you do is drink in order to do it because that's what it is. Like the problem isn't the incidents, it's the culture that doesn't allow people to be taught what post-traumatic stress is, the education, the support, the strategies. If they had that, then this would not be happening. But the thing is, there's just nothing. All you do is just basically go and drink, you try and shut down, just ignore it. You'll be okay until you're not. And you lock yourself away and isolated because you don't have that proper support.
And you mentioned earlier too, Jeff, and I think this is it's a pie with so many pieces to it, that you're working within a culture where it is not the done thing to put your hand up and say, hey, I'm struggling. The done thing is, well, you go and have a few more drinks. That's an acceptable way within that culture. It was to deal with stuff. There was nothing unmanly about that. That's the language we want to use. So you're fighting a number of fronts there, aren't you? Can I ask, are they doing it better now, Jeff? Are the coppers, are they looking after the troops better now than they were?
I think they're doing it better. I still think there's a long way. There's certainly nowhere near the level of education. I think education in terms of post-traumatic stress should be taught at the academy, because the fact that you need to know that you're going to see things and experience things in your career that's going to affect you, and it's okay. And if you do, here's the signs and symptoms, here's where to get help, here's where to get support, here's some strategies, here's what to do, rather than go, okay, we're going to teach you this stuff, then go out and we're going to let you go and do stuff by yourself and learn as you go. There's not enough education, there's not enough support. People still aren't feeling support enough, or want to actually go and put their hand up, go and get help, because it gets used against them. So they're going and getting help by themselves. I work with police all around Australia, around the world, with the work that I do now, who basically they don't want people knowing that they're affected by it. They're not getting that support when they should be getting that support. So because of the lack of education, we create our own association. I mean, because we label it a disorder, we see someone at work one day, not there the next. They're off work, they're using alcohol to cope, they're having relationship issues, their relationship's broken down, they've lost their job, they've attempted suicide, or they're taking their own life. And for us, that becomes the association to PTSD, because the fact that we don't know any different. To me, I mean, and then you have specialists who are telling you that this is basically you're stuck with the rest of your life. Okay, it's a life sentence, and they lock themselves away. People associate in Facebook groups with other people who are going through and being diagnosed with PTSD and being told and feeling that basically they're stuck with it. And that's not the case. I'm someone who's gone through it. I've gotten through it. It's not a disorder. It's not a definition. It's a diagnosis. But because of the lack of education, they don't know. I've been doing this for over 25 years. I know what it's like. I've gone through post-traumatic stress. I've fully recovered from it. I can talk about my events in detail. I can visit my locations and not be affected, but it's the lack of education in terms of what it is and what it isn't that are making people lock themselves away. It's ending careers, it's ending relationships, and it's ending lives, and it doesn't have to be that way.
It may be too simple a question, Jeff, but I feel obliged to ask it. Can you identify or sum up what it was succinctly that enabled you to get from where you were to come out the other side? What's the key to that?
I made a decision. It was the darkest time in my life. Here I was doing a job that I loved, I thought I was always going to do. I risked my life to protect the community doing my job. I wasn't supported, I wasn't recognised for the work I did, and I was in my early 20s. I'd been in the job 5 years. I could have easily been discharged after 5 years because of stuff I've been involved in. That's the stuff I've just spoken about now. That's all in the first 5 years of my career. But, I decided that I loved my job and I wasn't going to let this define me. I didn't believe that it was something that could affect you for the rest of your life. So I did whatever I could do. I learned NLP, like neuro-linguistic programming. I did research and everything I possibly could to basically teach myself how to process the past to get back to work. And I decided that I was not going to let this define me or hold me back, and I was going to use my experiences to help other people who are going through a similar sort of thing, who weren't being supported because of their service. So it was basically, I made a decision, I made a choice. This is not going to define me. It's not going to beat me. I'm going to recover, and I'm going to use my lived experience to make a difference. And that's what I've done ever since.
Jeff, after a 15, 16-year service in the New South Wales Police, you stepped away from the job in 2011, but I know you've been involved in a lot of, I guess, almost work-related activities since then that keeps sort of bringing you back into this space. Can you just give us a little bit of an overview of that?
Yeah, so my service ended in 2011, involved in a lot more incidents after I returned to work, but I use my experiences and the fact that people can relate to me because the fact I know and I understand because I've gone through it too.
You've penned a book?
I have. Funnily enough, it wasn't meant to be a book. It's called Split Second, and I mentioned it a few times in the interview that we have basically a split second to make a decision to take a life or save someone's life where everyone else gets the time to do it. So for me, I started writing the book after I jumped in the trade of the ute. It was about me processing my emotions, what I was feeling. So I wrote about that event and then the events before it and then leading up to actually joining the police, why I decided to join. And then I wrote it on my being off work, return to work, being involved in more events, and then my discharge, being suicidal, being recovered. So it actually took me 13 years to write it. It was very cathartic and allowed me to basically look at things from a different perspective, provide education information to members of the public and other police, and insight into what I went through and how I was able to do what I did.
Jeff, this has been such a great chat, and I do want to remind the listeners that these stories occurred over a 4-year period. And I mean, you were 16 years in the job. I can't help but feel we might need to get you back in here because I've got a sneaking suspicion you might have a few more stories up your sleeve. Jeff, I want to thank you so very much for coming in, for taking the time. You've driven down here from the Central Coast. I want to sincerely thank you for your service to the good people of Redfern and also the Central Coast. Your stories are incredible, and the work that you continue to do in that space, supporting others through your own experience. It's a real credit to you. And thank you so much for taking the time to come, and I've really enjoyed it.
No, thank you for having me. It's been a great opportunity to share my experiences, and through what you do and actually providing stories and information to people who otherwise wouldn't get it is wonderful what you do. So thank you for letting me be here today.
Crime Insiders Detectives is a LiSTNR original production. It's hosted by me, Brent Sanders, and produced by Ed Gooden and Holly Mitchell. Executive producer is Dan Mullins. Sound design and imaging is by Link Kelly.